So the first part of chapter 7 actually focuses on the golden age of sports, which is really the 1920s. And so that is what the focus of this is going to be. I asked you to read pages 223 to 233 at this point. So hopefully you have, and this will provide a little bit more context for what that section is about. So in the 1920s, we have a series of different technological innovations that are really going to impact the way that sports is followed and discussed. One of those things, of course, is the creation and the mass production of radios. And one example of a 1920s radio is found here. In addition to that, cinema is going to explode during the 1920s. The 1920s, of course, was an era of significant wealth and prosperity in the country, and so entertainment is going to become a big part of the way in which Americans live their life. Of course, one of the other things that was mentioned in your book was the rise of the flapper, and you can see a couple of them here. Certainly a departure from the way that women were thought of in the past. If anything, just take a look at the length of their hair and the skin that is showing in regards to their clothes, and that is certainly a big move from some of the ways in which women were dressing in previous periods that we have discovered. Lastly, the importance of public transportation, especially cars, is going to have a big impact on the way in which people watch games, as well as where people are going to make choices about building, for example, baseball diamonds or recreational facilities. One of the things that we have been talking about is the impact of immigrants during this period, and something that's important that is going to take place in 1924 is the Johnson-Reed Act. And the Johnson-Reed Act actually created immigration quotas based on national origin for the United States. And so here on your right, you can actually find the way in which those quotas were set. These quotas were actually created to discourage certain types of immigration, in particular, immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe. So at the turn of the century, there was significant immigration from Russia, as well as countries that we consider to be part of Eastern Europe today. In addition to that, we have talked about the many Greek and Italian players who were part of sports during this period, and those are precisely the people that they are trying to prevent from coming in. So, for example, if you take a look at the way in which immigrants, for the most part, are going to be admitted, you'll notice that there's a huge difference in regards to where they're from and how many people are allowed in. Just to give you an idea, the way that they decided to develop the quotas was actually to go back to the first census that was actually taken in the 18th century. So certainly a retrograde way of thinking of immigration. And of course, that is going to impact the way that sports are played in America and who gets to play those sports. In addition to that, there's a section on the impact of African American culture during this period, and there are references to the Great Migration. The Great Migration was the largest migration within the United States of people really moving from southern states to northern cities. This begins in the 1910s and actually will continue through the 1960s. And so pictured here, you see two different families that were pictured as part of this movement. In addition to that, you will have the rise of jazz and blues culture, as well as the Harlem Renaissance, which is going to include both music as well as art and poetry. And there are lots of individuals who are really going to focus on the richness of African American culture. And of course, that is going to diffuse to other parts of the country. one of the things that I'm asking you to do is to take a look at the video for the Harlem Globetrotters. Now, the Harlem Globetrotters actually emerged during this period in 1927. And one of the things that you will get to see on this particular short video is actual footage taken during that period. In addition to that, I will warn you, it's a little melodramatic, but just stick with it. It's actually less than 2.5 minutes. So, but it is interesting to sort of see how the Globetrotters get started, and of course, how they will impact not only sports, but really the way in which African American athletes are perceived during this period and beyond. Lastly, I wanted to call your attention to the way in which Rube Foster, who was both a baseball player and, of course, one of the founders of the National Negro League in 1920, becomes important in terms of the way that African Americans are going to be able to play in their own professional league. He's certainly seen as influential. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame, as you can see here on the bottom right. And he is going to be a big promoter of African American baseball games, the league, and of course players. And your book also makes a note that there's also going to be the development of a second National Negro League. So one of the things that we are going to see is that just like in baseball, we have the National League, the American League, and the other league that emerged at the turn of the century. We're going to see similar efforts during this period. Something to keep in mind, of course, is that the National Negro League, unlike the other leagues, actually allowed for women to play with men in the baseball leagues. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we move forward. But it is important to note that there are actually quite a few women in the Negro Hall of Fame who were very important for some of the teams during this period. Okay, so for the completion of this module, what I need you to do is to watch the videos on the Harlem Globetrotters and the 2 videos for the NHL. The Globetrotters video is only 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The NHL one is a little bit longer, so that would have taken the rest of our class. We'll get a chance to discuss the actual videos on Monday, and then just answer the question in the quiz provided in the module. You have until 11:59 p.m. on Friday to finish that, and otherwise have a great weekend. For those of you who are presenting on Monday, I will send you another reminder that you are doing your presentation then. I do want to again thank all of those of you who were part of the first iteration of presentations. You all did a great job, and I'm still working on those rubrics, so over the weekend I'll finish sending comments and feedback. Y'all have a great weekend.